Hey, Chamber members, Alan Waters here, your Director of Marketing and Communications at the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce and your Words of Wisdom podcast. Today I'm joined by two guests, so I'm going to toss it over to each of them individually. That's also why you can see me in a slightly odd angle. So first, I'm going to toss it over to Jess. Jess, introduce yourself.
Good morning. So Jess Rehmann, I'm the business banker with Carter Bank. So I mainly gear towards small businesses within the community.
All right. And then Jason Hardy, who barely needs an introduction, but give us one anyway.
Well, yeah, I'm Jason Hardy, commercial banker, market manager with Carter Bank as well, and glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. So I'm going to dive in our first question that I ask everybody, and we'll still take it one by one. What does success mean to you?
Wow. So success is being able to accept if you were to fail, because the only way that you can succeed is being able to learn from your mistakes. But the main key is ensuring that if you do fail, that you get back up and try again.
I'm not sure I can say it better than that.
All right.
I think she nailed it. No, success I think is exactly that. It's succeeding or excelling in the face of adversity.
And when you look at that on the professional lens versus the personal lens, how does that change for you? Because I feel like personally, I'm a little more lenient on myself at work than I am at home. And I think that's changed since I've had Cora. Well, I didn't have it. I was there. What about for you? Do you feel like those things shift when you're at work versus home? Does success have different meanings in those different places?
Yeah, I think oddly enough, I mean, I've been doing this almost 30 years now, which is really hard to say, but I think that at some point the two kind of merge. In a role where you're in the community, you're helping people, you're doing the same kind of behaviors in your family. I think it all kind of merges together, and it's hard to tell where one ends and one stops, honestly.
Yeah, and it can be exhausting.
Oh, yeah.
I agree to that, but I think I'm definitely more hard on myself at work. But then it does go and bleed into at home too, right? Because you want to have standards, especially for yourself. Because otherwise, if you don't, then I feel like you can be sloppy, and it kind of bleeds in to each other. So especially with the military too. So it kind of keeps me on point to where I try to keep myself a little bit more structured. Mm-hmm. So I definitely put more expectations on myself, which I probably don't need to, but everyone does that.
Yeah. I'm in that particular phase of life where I told Rachel last night, I'm struggling, and I come to work and all I can think about is, I really wish I was there with them. I feel guilty. And then I get home and I'm stuck in that, well, I've got to get this done and this done and this done, and I'm still not fully present. So I don't know personally, I think people always have that like work-life balance. I don't know that
it's hard to find sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know that it's ever equal either. It's constantly, it's like that seesaw. You're going back and forth. I ask this, and I mean it in the nicest way possible. You are both in banking. You have the banking titles. I feel like banking titles often are scary. They're a lot of words combined. But I also think it's something that you look back at high school. Not many people graduate high school saying, I'm going to be a market manager for a bank. So how did you both go from that process of what you wanted to be when you grew up to you grew up?
Yeah. Well, I'll go. I think when I was in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I told my stepmom and my parents that I want to be a veterinarian, and they laughed at me. I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to be a veterinarian. So actually in high school, we had some of the recruiters come in, and they were like, you want to jump out of planes? I was like, wow, that's cool. I want to do that. So I enlisted. I was like, this is going to be super cool. I'm going to shoot some guns. I was like, this is awesome. But I did do that, the reservist part-time. So then I could take the advantage of going back to school. But with work, I really enjoyed the money. So I stopped going to school, and I kind of got wrapped up with that. So I was working retail at a retail store for 6 years, and I loved it. I loved the atmosphere, how it was structured. But it didn't jive with my life because now I had my son. So I needed to find something a little bit more structured. And someone was like, why don't you try to be a bank teller? I was like, I can count money. I can do this, And that's like the first thing people ask. Like, I don't know if I can count right. But I started and I loved it. And I think been in banking now for April 16th will be 10 years. So I think, looking at Jason, how far he came, it's inspiration for how he is now. And that's kind of what I've always wanted to strive to be. I always wanted to do the next best thing. So I always wanted to be, I always tried and listened. And luckily enough, I had some really good mentors and really good leadership along the way to help me get where I am.
You threw out 30 years, so I don't want to mess with you and say I hope you can remember back to high school.
Right.
But what about you, Jason?
Yeah, I had a college roommate who started a paper one time, and that he was born at a young age, right? So I guess that kind of applies here. No, I mean, back to high school, gosh, I was banking was the last thing I was thinking of. My dad was a banker before he retired, so I guess it's in my blood. You hear that a lot. I don't really know what that means, but I guess it's out there. No, high school for me was. I think I could have done a lot better grades wise if I had tried harder. Everything was kind of easy, so I focused on having as much fun and meeting as many people as I could and that kind of thing. And I think that kind of sets the tone for being an effective banker, because really it's all about meeting people and forming relationships and that type of thing. So I think it started there. It definitely built in college. I went to a small school right in the middle of Virginia, and I was in a fraternity, but I was probably the least fratty guy that you've ever met. It was, again, just all about meeting people and relationships. So interviewed on campus, and ultimately Wachovia Bank down in Raleigh was the better offer that I had coming out of college. So despite my pedigree, I went ahead and took that plunge, moved to Raleigh, started meeting people immediately, and just everything since then has kind of built on itself to get me here today.
It's, I think a lot of businesses relationship driven regardless, but banking in particular, you talked about the fact before we were on air, you went to elementary school here. You're from this community. Jess, you're from Georgia, right?
Well, yeah, I was actually born and raised in South Jersey, but
Oh, okay. I understand. Ping pong around. So what's that difference feeling, and I don't know if you've ever had this conversation yourselves, of being here, working with people that you likely have known your entire life versus being in this industry and making relationships sometimes from ground one. How is that juxtaposition for the two of you?
I think it's interesting. I think people not from here, I can't really speak for them, but people from here realize what a special place it is. And I hate to use the coined phrase special place, but it is different. When I went away to college and ultimately moved to North Carolina, you realize that the mountain attitude, just the heritage of where you come from here really does translate differently. And I talked to a lot of my high school classmates who have gone on to California, Georgia, different places around the country, and they say the same thing. I think you have a certain level of grounding here that a lot of other folks don't have. It's not a very pretentious area as opposed to a Richmond or Charlotte. You just don't have a lot of that. There are certainly folks who are well set financially, but generally you don't know it. They're just really down to earth, which is a really valuable point. And I think that makes it easier, both to detect the falseness of some people when you go other places, but also to put up with it, to kind of see around it and try to find good things in them that you have in common and can talk about.
For you, Jess, not being from here and making those relationships, obviously you're here at the chamber and other pieces, but what has been helpful for you and as you're starting that and building that?
It takes time. And it can take up to 3 years to really try to really earn people's trust. It's all who the connections that you make, and being yourself, and really being genuine, and really trying to show that you want to help people, right? And sometimes you don't get that trust right away, but really working with somebody and really meeting them and understanding how they are really does help you grow. And that way, a lot of it's referral based too. So if you have someone who's worked with you, most likely and if they enjoy it, they're going to go ahead and refer you, which has been really helpful for me. And really trying to meet people. You know, sitting in an office really isn't, versus Jason, everyone knows Jason, right? Versus me, I need to be able to kind of put my neck out there a little bit and really try to meet people. So it is completely different. So it is hard. It is very challenging, but don't give up, right? So there's a lot of people that are being transplanted and coming over here. I've met several people from Atlanta, and from Jersey that lived here. And it's like, that moved here. And you're like, wow, what brought you here? They're like, the Valley. It's really pretty. It's small. Everyone's really nice for the most part. I don't think I've ever ran into a mean person here yet, which is phenomenal. Versus like Jersey, people don't open up the door for you unless you're at Wawa. But, and then especially Georgia, the hustle and bustle. So you really you have a mixed culture here, and it's really nice.
I think one thing that we both kind of danced around is, and advice to people that I give a lot, who are just starting out in careers and that kind of thing, is integrity, right? You just maintain a high level of integrity, and that helps you earn the trust that Jess was talking about, and that helps you work your way into different groups of people who are, doing different things that you can kind of meld with. If you maintain high integrity, then everything else kind of flows from that. They learn to trust you. They can count on you. You do what you say you're going to do, and I think that's really, really important. The people who are fake, are lazy, just who put up a good front, I think most people can sniff that out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love that you both hit that, because I immediately thought back. I heard a lot when I was younger. It takes years to build trust and seconds to lose it. So that is such an important piece to not just any banking relationship, but relationships in general. Jason, being from here, being from that, knowing that you're more in the community and scene, do you ever have issues with people going, well, I know Jason, so that means I'm going to get the loan or I'm going to get the piece? How do you manage those? Is where it's like, hey, no, you've got to have your ducks in a row. I can't just flip a switch.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it does happen, right? I mean, there's a lot of those assumptions that get made just based on relationships, and one of the things that it took me a while, to be honest, in banking to learn was the difference between being an order taker and being an advisor. Managing the transaction versus managing the relationship. And what I try to be good at is, even if I've got to turn somebody down for a loan or anything, say we can't help you, which is a terrible thing to say to somebody, right? It's really, really hard from a subconscious level to tell somebody I can't help you. But the goal there, I think, is to leave them with something, right? You don't want to just say no and walk away and that's the end of it. Well, here's some things that you can do to make yourself helpful, or here's somebody that I think that can help you. And I don't know that that's a being from here thing or not. I think that's really just the desire to help people, number one, but then also the experience of having built resources to be able to do so in a way that's going to really help them, as opposed to, you want to build them up, you don't want to break them down.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think even being able to say, well, it's a no, but if you do X, Y, Z, come back to us, we can still do. How long have you been with Carter Bank?
It will be 9 years in June of this year.
Okay. So you weren't there. I often, when I heard that Carter Bank didn't have computers until 2013, I was like, we were on the fourth iPhone. So what has that culture changed with Carter Bank? Obviously, neither of you were there when that was the time, but is there any of those pieces that you think, all right, this has actually been a benefit to us because there is that culture of a certain mindset? Like I said, every time I think about it, I'm like, I can't fathom, because I'm a 90s kid, but I grew up, I mean, I remember the iPhone coming out.
Right.
And when I go, oh, you have a computer, and then someone said, yeah, then we shared one. I was like, what do you mean you shared one?
Right.
We shared pens.
I know. The stories that you hear, and I think it's true of any organization, not just of Carter, right? Mm-hmm. We have our own story, which is a really cool story, and I'm happy to tell anybody who wants to listen. But yeah, my first day was June 29th of 2017, and I think the first day I spent in Martinsville training, meeting people, just figuring out where I was going to be in the world on the corporate level. Mm-hmm. That was a Friday, I think. And then the next Monday, you can do the math of what day that was. I showed up here at the Marketplace branch in Christiansburg, and they let me in, gave me a key. I met everybody. I sat down. I started organizing my desk and making phone calls and writing notes and all those things that you do when you first start your job. At noon, I got up and I was feeling hungry, so I went and got a sandwich. Came back, 30 minutes later or so. At 2:00, all the lights went off in the branch. There was a whoosh sound as every other person who worked in the branch that day left, because in the 80s and early 90s, banks closed from 2 to 3:30 every day to balance. Everybody got lunch, and they opened back up at 3:30 for normal business, and it was the next business day, basically.
Huh.
Carter was still doing that in 2017, and nobody gave me any warning. So I'm sitting here in the branch in the dark, scared that if I moved a muscle, the alarm was going to go off, because banks have alarms for good reason. When they came back at 3:30, I very politely fussed and said, "Please don't ever leave me alone in this branch again." I didn't know what to do. I couldn't use the restroom. I was too scared. They all had a good laugh, and it's. And now I think transitioning that, we've had a very steep growth pattern over the past 9 years, and in doing that, for instance, our online banking capabilities. I would put that up against any other bank out there, because we were able to go out and get a top of market product from day one, as opposed to having to continuously upgrade, continuously decide which level of the upgrade was financially feasible. We were able to go out there and grab one from day one. So that's one example of how I think from a products and services standpoint, we do lead the market, and it's a good place to be.
I find it interesting because I don't know who makes the rules, but even where I'm from, there's all the banks close on Thursdays at 2, and that's just when they're closed. And I'm like, why? But you start to see some of those rules, and it's interesting how that kind of like just follows along. And eventually, no one at Carter now would be like, well, I was here when they closed. But that's really fun, locking Jason in the building.
Yep.
So, Jess, again, we were talking about titles earlier, and I don't ever understand any of them. So can you explain to me a little bit more about what it is you do and those realities?
Yeah, sure. So Carter Bank has done a lot of things to really help the bank grow and to really be affected in the community. So they started this business banking line probably almost going on 2 years ago now. I call myself the lucky number 6 because they reached out to me and asked me to go ahead and join their team, and I'm really glad that I did. So I really am the bridge between commercial and the branches, right? So I am a really big advocate for the branches to help them grow and have conversation. Because you're right, we still have folks who I talk to, they're like, do you guys have online banking yet? And it's really funny, and it makes me laugh because it is true. But now, since I try to do so much in the net, and within the community, within the branches, I'm kind of like essentially the cheerleader. Look at all these great things that we have. Look how much we've came. How long we've come from. So essentially, we say that we're like an 8-year-old company. We're not, but with all the changes that we've done with the rebranding. Our online banking, we can print debit cards in the branch. We have a lot of great things that, we want to go ahead and talk about. So, as me, the business banker, I need to reach out to the businesses who want to still bank with a community bank and not a lot of these big banks that are local here, especially because a lot of the mergers, people get frustrated. They kind of lose that touch, which is a lot of things that we hear now, right? Not always, but there are some cases where. But I'm like, hey, let me be your banker. Let us be your banker. So it's more of a personal touch.
Has the rebrand? Because I know that happened just I think a year and a half ago.
I think so.
Has that shifted anything for you as just getting people? Because it's not a major. I mean, it was mostly some colors. It went from Carter Bank and Trust, Carter Bank. How has that impacted just y'all's day to day of working with people? Anything other than like I'm handing you a different color pen?
I think it's a little more than that. Yeah, I mean, the bank saw a need, I think, to really over the past 6 or 7 years advance where we were from an image and a technology and all the things that go along with that that are higher pay grade than me. I think a key aspect to that is our branding and is our image in the on our branches, in the public, in our marketing strategies. So I think it was pretty bold, actually. It went from it was hard for us in this area. We maroon was our dominant color, right? And that kind of worked out seamlessly. We're the community bank of the Hokies, so that all went together. So to go from that to the blue color that we are now, it was a bold step, especially in this area. But I think we all deal with change a little differently, right? That's just part of it. I think I love the new logo. I love the new colors. It does kind of scream advancement for us, I think, and I think it was needed.
I also, this is not a dig at any of our other banking members. We love you. But not having first in your title is helpful.
Gosh, yes.
I always get confused, and I've been at events and I've called people the wrong bank, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, the other one. So we've heard from Jess about what she does. Jason, how does yours differ? And over the years in your banking, how have you also progressed through that? Because I know of retail side, I know of commercial side, but I think many of us know there's a manager and there's tellers and don't think about what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what people's impression of banks are, right? And I know that, and it's really by design. I mean, what you're supposed to think of is the place that you go to deposit your money, get your money, make sure your money's safe, that type of thing. I mean, banks have spent a lot of time on marketing to really formulate that image. The good thing is that Jess and I do get to work behind the scenes a little bit. We do get to work in an advisory role with certain clients in order to help them grow. And we're able to do that because we're not seeing 150 people a day like a teller might be, right? The time just wouldn't be there. The idea is if it's a transactional piece of business, we want you to see that smiling face when you walk in to the teller line, hand your money across or get your money back across. That's the way that works. If you need something more in depth, then we schedule appointments with you, and you come sit with Jess or you come sit with me, and we do those things.
And when you're looking at clients and people that you're working with, is it all the way down to single person small business up to, well, I'm looking at their name, so like a Lewis Gale, or where do you really find your niches?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that really I think the good bankers refine over years and years and years. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Right.
In my career, I started off as a teller. I mean, that was my first role with the bank. I moved into repoing cars for a little while. I've done
Brave
a little.
Man.
I've got some stories. We can talk about that sometime. Every little bit kind of builds to the next, right? And I think when you're in banking for a long time, weird to say, I've always been the youngest guy at every place I've ever worked. So it's weird to say that now, but everything builds on itself. And now, just because of my everyday role, I don't spend a lot of time in the branches. That's more Jess's role. She has a larger piece of the pyramid, closer to the base than I do. I kind of get a little higher, and my clients are everywhere from New York to Florida. I've got a concentration in Georgia as well, so I'm on a plane to Georgia a couple times a year. North Carolina, I've got a client base down there because I spent a lot of time down there. I mean, I was there for 20 years. So, you develop certain skill sets based on knowledge that you gain over the years. You do your best to focus that knowledge in a way that will help the greatest amount of clients, and then hopefully you are continuously gaining new clients just because of the work that you're doing. Jess mentioned referrals earlier. I mean, I think any kind of professional, that's what you're hoping for, is having other people market for you.
And then Jess, for you, what because this is always the hardest part. I think it's like real estate. The answer is anyone who wants to buy a house. But when you really get down to it, how do you start looking at what's going to be your target and who you work with the best?
Yeah, so I really enjoy working with all businesses. I don't typically, like, I don't really gear towards more of like investment real estate, but I want more of like the local businesses that can impact the community. So a lot of times I get a lot of startups or people who have like great ideas. That is awesome, but they've never been in business before. So I connect a lot. I'm really close with the Small Business Development Center. So I'll kind of get their ideas, kind of look at, talk about their finances, what are their long-term plans. Then I'll typically connect them, right? So as Jason said before, it's like, hey, I can't help you now, but let's get you there, right? Because you have a vision, you have a dream. Let's go ahead and conquer that. So I will talk to anybody. I had this, someone asked me this question too. It can be veterinarians. It can be your local automobile shop, repair shop, anybody who is interested, right? I think often businesses don't really look at their finances because they're so wrapped up in their businesses. So it's really hard for them to be like, oh, I've been wanting to do this. There's been some times where I've called on businesses, cold calling and introducing myself. They're like, you know what? I'm so glad you called because I've been meaning to get to the bank, but I just haven't had a chance to. I'm like, well, let me come by and stop by and see you. So I'm really flexible. I really will try to sit with the customer if it makes sense, or maybe have a really good conversation to see where the next steps can go, how I can help them. So I try to really be hands-on as much as I can. Sometimes I might not be all the time, but there'll be chances where I'll try my best to really be there for the client to help them get where they need to be.
Awesome. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I'm going to talk a little bit more with y'all about what it is small business owners and business owners here of all kinds can really do, and what are some best practices.
Sure.
In life, there are no dress rehearsals. We don't get another take just because we missed our mark. Every day is the real deal. It needs to count. That's what excites us at Carter Bank. Whether you're budgeting for something special, turning someday into today, building, growing, succeeding, Carter Bank stands with you with the financial tools and guidance to make sure this one life is a life lived full. Learn more at carterbank.com. Member FDIC.
Hey everybody, we are back real quick. It's odd to do when they're in the room. Want to give a shout out to Carter Bank for being our sponsor of the podcast room, making this possible and making it a little more cozy for me to come in here and sit. So thank you, Carter Bank, for doing that. All right, over back to Carter Bank. So before we get into the best practices and those things, I want to hit something that I don't think many people consider, which is you have compliance that you have to abide by. I don't think y'all's is as strict as some of our financial advisor members and things. But while we're talking about this, none of this stuff is a guarantee you do it, you are going to hit success, right? I feel like guarantee is probably not allowed in y'all's world either. So I'll bleep it. But when you're getting into these best practices and things, where do you have to find that balance in yourself between this is what I would do versus this is what I think you should do?
I think, conversation cures a lot of questions, right? Cures a lot of ills. And I think, we do have to watch what we say. It is important, right? Because Jason has opinions, clearly. The bank probably can't have opinions.
Right.
So that there is a line there. I think what you've got to do is just make sure that you're communicating in an efficient manner and making sure that your audience knows that what's coming out of your mouth is whether it's either opinion statement or official business. You've really got to be able to discern between the two.
Yeah. When you get into that though, how much of your, because you're talking about you have some clients that you advise, how much of your opinion does become a part of that advisory versus you're strictly by the numbers?
I think that depends on the conversation, and I'm sorry to be so gray on that, but that's kind of where it is. I think, a lot of it depends on, it's situational, certainly. How likely is what I'm about to say to cause, significant injury, and that's not necessarily physical injury, but how seriously are they relying on me for this information? Is this the only source of information that they're going to be using to make a decision that they're going to make? And if that's the case, I got to be real careful, right?
Because at the end of the day, you're advising on that financial piece, but you're not a business advisor. You're not there to tell them how to run their business or do those things. That's where you've got the SBDC, Town of Christiansburg, Small Business Development, same with Blacksburg. We do that sometimes at the chamber. People will come up and be like, how do I do this? And it's like, I cannot tell you. I might have my own thoughts, but like that's not our world, so I can't step in it. When you get to some of those next steps, though, and you're working, so I'll give you an example. What's the difference when you're working with a business who's been around for 1 year versus a business who's been around for a decade? Where do you start to see different processes that you can work with them and help them for the future?
Well, I wouldn't say gray, but every case is so special and unique, right? So, we could have a business or somebody who's had a business in a different state for several years. I use this example all the time, but maybe they moved up here because their parents were ill, maybe their parents passed away, and they want to get back into business, and they want to create this area of their home. Technically, that's a startup. But since they've had previous, experience in owning a business, they can provide financials to see how they are. But we will also gauge in conversation is how, like, what's your, who's your competitors? How are you going to be successful? So there are some hoops that they would have to jump through, but it's not your traditional startup. Some businesses who've never been in business before, maybe have done it for a year. I mean, we can look at their financials. I mean, on my side, but probably we wouldn't lend to them probably to at least, rule of thumb is 2 to 3 years, really. Because that way we can really start, the first year you're kind of really up and coming. Maybe the second year you might start to see a little bit of profit. And then hopefully really in that third year, you're really starting to grow. So that can really help. So I guess it depends on if they're looking for lending or if they're looking for deposit, strategies and growth, cash management, because it's not just lending, right? So we can do a lot more than that. So it depends on what they're really looking for. So is it deposit growth? Because, we can help them there. With, some of our accounts, they have interest, so if they're looking to grow there, or especially our cash management, do they need payroll, credit card processing? So there are some things that we could help them. So it just depends on where that conversation goes. We've seen, well, for myself too, I'm sure Jason, we've seen companies in business for 10 years and their books aren't good. So it just really depends on, where they are. Are they kind of on their way out to where they probably need a succession plan to, like, are they looking to sell the business? Are they looking to close? So it just really depends on where they are and how they're doing. So every conversation is so different.
I guess in that, what are the items that you can really sit down and help people with? Because I think it really goes beyond what I can even imagine right now. But I think about, for me personally, when I'm looking at, I've got this amount of money in savings versus if I put it in a CD, it's going to make this more. When you get into business, obviously that becomes a lot more important. I'm going to say that back. Not more important, but it is, I think, a little more stressful sometimes than just doing it for personal. Like you are beholden to a lot more. So what are those different things that y'all can help people with and that someone listening might not know? Oh, I can go to a bank and get help from them.
So kind of going over the advisory role, right? So depending on where they are in their career, I always ask them, like, who's your attorney? Who's your CPA? Do you have a business banker? So this is a new conversation. They say, well, no. Okay, well, you need to have, these are your 3 folks that you need to have, that you be able to call, that you need help with. Who do you have an advisory? So that's where I'll bring in the Small Business Development Center to where they can probably really help deep dive, right? So it's a lot of their homework that they need to do too. But if they don't know where to go, let me make those connections. And the major thing is I say, the bank's not advising. I said, but me, as your banker, reach out to these folks, right? Get a feel for them. I was like, just because you talk to them once, it's like, right, you need a second opinion from a doctor. Let me meet you. Maybe have you get connected with these people, And then if it works well, if it fits in your world, let's start from there. So really it's making the connections to make sure they have the tools to be successful, right? To make sure that their business can grow. Obviously we have products that we can help them on the back end, but also they need to be known in the community and be in front of the right people, right? So, if you have, a restaurant that's starting up, but no one lives around you, it's like, how are you going to get that attention? There's been times where like, I don't think that's a great idea, but this is me personally speaking. Have you thought about this? No, I didn't. So maybe just chiming in like, oh, well, I've seen this before. This person's done this avenue. So I'm like, I'm not familiar, but this is the way that they've gone. So I will advise, but not say, hey, the bank is telling you to do this.
Right.
It's more of like me, this is what I've experienced, what my customers have done. So kind of have some type of relevance there.
When you get to some of that and you're looking at, all right, you've got 10 employees versus you've got 50 employees and you're bringing in $1 million a year, where do you look at some of those products and where do those products differ?
Okay. Well, the Carter Bank has a lot of partnership with, I guess it's our private wealth division that we partner with externally, who they have some products, right, that could help gear them towards. So I guess we also have, essentially insurance too. So, if they have employees, what kind of benefits are you doing for your employees, right? Do you have a 401k plan? Do you have workers' comp? So those are some deep conversations that we'll have. A big thing is, do you have, life insurance? How is your business protected, right? So if you're the only business owner, but you have 10 employees, what if something were to happen? Are they going to be covered? Like, because those are the things that we need to talk about. So it's not just the surface. It's the more in-depth conversation. I mean, feel free to chime in on that one.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. I'll say every case is different again, right? You'll probably hear that a lot today. Every case is different. And I think the way we treat a one-person shop is going to be different than we treat a company with 50 employees, right? Because the one-person shop they might be most concerned about their family. That's what they're providing for. Whereas the larger company, a lot of families are depending on that. And Jess was talking about key man insurance, right? That's pretty important to just for continuity's sake. If something were to happen to the partner or I guess the owner or one of the partners, you want to have some continuity, and money doesn't cure everything, but it certainly helps get you through some low points until you can discover those solutions. So we're going to sit down and we're going to ask a lot of questions and hopefully make a lot of notes and really listen. And that I think is one of the qualities of a better banker, is their ability to not just tell a client what the solutions are, but to listen to what really the underlying issues are and then provide solutions for their interpretations of those solutions.
What are some things that small business owners can prepare for depending on the different kinds of loans they may be looking for? If I'm coming in looking for something to cover my equipment versus I am looking to purchase a piece of property where I'm going to house, what are some pieces that they need to do before they ever necessarily come talk to you?
Yeah, I mean that really doesn't change. That's pretty standard. The bank is always going to look at two things. It's going to look at how the business itself is doing and its capacity to make the payments, but then also look at the individuals behind the business. So we think of things in terms of primary, secondary, and tertiary sources of repayment. And if we can identify those three things that have some strength, we're going to feel pretty good about making that loan. So primary is typically the company's ability to generate revenue, and we like cash flow more than we like revenue. Revenue itself with high levels of expenses doesn't do us a lot of good.
Right. So
it's really got to be cash flow. Secondary is a lot of times going to be the owners or from a guarantee standpoint with what their ability to help if the primary source for whatever reason goes away. And then tertiary is going to be typically if we've got a situation where we these days especially most often do have collateral, is the value of that collateral going to be sufficient to where if the first and secondary source for payment fail, is the bank going to be made whole that way? One thing we didn't really get into before, and sorry to kind of ramble here, but our our primary job really is risk assessment. And we focus on that as we're having conversations with our clients about what are the risks to your business, what is the risk to your family, what is the risk to your lifestyle, not necessarily in that order, right?
Right.
Just depending on the individual that we're speaking with. So as we're assessing those risks, what our brain is doing is processing, how do we backstop that? If things go wrong, how do we mitigate that risk and make sure that that we can provide solutions, or the solutions that we provide will provide some level of support in case something fails.
I love the risk assessment piece because I was talking, I think this was last year, the year before, to someone in the life insurance realm, and a lot of what they're doing is still also life insurance financial advising, risk assessment. And I pointed out that there are some online, and always, please everyone, if you're listening to anyone online, just think about it. But they recommend, if you're talking to someone that is going to be assessing your risk and those things, do not overshare. Don't say certain things. Keep stuff to yourself. And I feel like on the consumer side, it becomes, oh, if I don't say this, I might get approved. But on your side, what are some of the dangers of just leaving out those pieces and thinking and trying to, I guess, game the system and think, well, if I don't talk about this, I'll still get it and it'll be fine. Where do you go? No, you're not fine. We need to know.
Let me take that from a different angle, if you don't mind. I mentioned the transactional business versus the advisory business before, and what I would typically kind of associate with transactional business is going to be a client who wants to do anything to get the loan, right? And not necessarily take full advantage of the capabilities that the banker or the lawyer or the CPA might have in their advisory roles. So if leave consumer aside, like you said, on the business and commercial side, if you're intentionally omitting information, it's probably not going to be a great relationship from a two-way standpoint, right? We're already kind of getting kicked off on a sour foot because of you, frankly, right? This is one of the cases where it is your fault.
Not Alan,
Yeah.
but
Generally you, right? Not the specific Alan you, but we're in this role because we want to help. I mean, there is a certain component of that, and it's important to us. We want to see your business succeed. We want to be a part of that. That's the fun part. When we see your business succeed, there's a lot of satisfaction that we get from that, and so we're going to ask questions. We're going to try to get information out of you that we think is pertinent. If you omit information or falsify information, in my brain, I think we're done. We'll just kind of move along.
Yeah,
And best of luck to you.
Yeah, really. And I think we've been doing it for a while, especially Jason. Like, we can kind of pick up on it, right? So we want to be your friends, right? We want to be your advisors. And I tell people up front, tell me everything. I was like, please don't hide anything, because I'm going to find it, or it's going to come up eventually. So if you can just let me know ahead of time, I said, it would make things so much easier. Just be honest with me. Because if we're, depending on, the loan size or what type of loan it is, it doesn't take just a week. It could be a couple months. And we're going down the line and we're like, we're about to close, but we run into this stop. It's like we just wasted so much time. If they would have told us in the very beginning, would have made it so much a lot easier on all of us and everybody who's also involved too. But generally, I think we're pretty good about if we feel like there's a puzzle piece missing, like we'll try to touch on that or try to engage that conversation or have them try to talk about it. But yeah, you're right. There's been times where it's like, I don't feel good about this. Like you told me it was going to be for this, but now you've changed your mind and so it's completely pivoted. So it makes us hesitant, right? Risk assessment, it kind of shows uneasy. So we want to help you, but you need to be honest with us. Be honest with your bankers.
Yeah.
And I think the flip side of that from the client's perspective is, they've got to feel good about airing their dirty laundry with us. Right. There's got to be that integrity, that trust that has to be established. So understand that if we haven't effectively built that, then we need to take a step back and spend some time together. And
because I can see that, obviously someone can come in and just be incredibly anxious about the fact that they're like, I do need this to get to that next piece. I want them to look at me and see something good. But the negative's still there. They're not going to go away unless you actually do something about it. And that's not a problem. Like you said, it could be the answer's no, but let's do these things and we'll still get there.
Right.
I feel like your colleagues in the mortgage departments are going to hear this a lot more than you do. But with rates being what rates are, they've got all the fun sayings, date the rate, buy the house. So do you have anything on those lines? Do you have any suggestions as people are starting to make some of their decisions based on what the rate percentage is? How does that come into your conversations?
We are very relationship based, right? So we want to help you succeed, and we're going to work really hard to get you there. So we would like to have your whole relationship, and I think, again, every deal is going to be looked at differently. So it's just upon a conversation. Depends on what type of loan that you're looking to do, but we're very much relationship based, and we want to take care of you, your entire picture.
Yeah, I think it's an unfair comparison between mortgage and what Jess and I do. Mortgage, over the years, has just, for consumer protection's part of it, which I totally support, but it's really made pricing loans fairly vanilla, right? They've got matrices that they use. They've got guidelines they've got to follow. It's a business that I don't fully understand, and I know smart people who can do that, so I rely heavily on them to do that. But as I said earlier, we're in the risk assessment business, and so we may not win every deal on pricing. We don't typically win every deal on pricing, and I'll typically lead with that. I'll say if I'm doing my job right, I'm not going to be the cheapest rate for you unless you, client, have done a great job at presenting the loan, mitigated every piece of risk that I've presented to you. If we think there's some risk in the deal, we're going to increase the rate a little bit. We still want to price it to win it. Don't get me wrong, but we're still going to price it in a way that the bank is going to be protected if, for whatever reason, those payments stop getting made. So we may try to capture a little bit more on the front end while you're making the payments.
Yeah.
To offset our perception of any risk of you not making those payments.
Yeah, so we get all the time, I'll get random text messages. Where's your rate at? I'm like, what are you looking to buy?
Right.
Yeah, like, what are you doing?
Help me out here a little bit.
Yeah, give me a little bit more. So it's not as easy as like walking into the bank, get a consumer loan, to buy a car. It's not that simple. But so again, like, I know it sounds repetitive, but it is. Every case is different.
Well, if you will, either one of you, tell everyone where they can learn more about Carter Bank and all of that fun stuff.
Let's have 101s, coffees, business after hours. Let's grab a drink.
Yeah, easiest thing. From a global perspective, we've got a great website, right? CarterBank.com. I mentioned online banking earlier, so we've got a lot of information published there. Business owners in the area, business owners regionally, reach out to Jess and me and let us sit down with you, and we'll come to your business. We'll meet you in a coffee shop. We'll meet you anywhere.
Any parting words of wisdom from either of you?
I'll say, thanks to the Chamber. I think Carter Bank and the Chamber, we've had a great partnership over the last several years, and we really do appreciate it. We've had associates on the board, and we've had associates lead the organization, and we've had committee involvement and event involvement, and we're very thankful for that, and look forward to that continuing.
Yeah. Words of wisdom. Please don't ever be scared to ask questions, especially for our small businesses. There's no dumb question, right? One thing I always say is, Jason and I are in the banking world. Typically, small businesses aren't, right? So you need to ask questions to be able to understand. But thank you for the Chamber, and everyone, please reach out to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please make sure you like, follow, download, subscribe, all the things so you don't miss another episode or any of the other content we put out for the Chamber. In the meantime, please go out, invest, connect, engage, and prosper.